The struggle with the world, in both its sacred and profane forms, is the most powerful set of ideas at work today. It is, however, in a paradoxical situation. It has unrivaled influence over humanity, not only through its religious forms, but also, and above all, in its secular manifestations. The modern programs of emancipation through the reconstruction of social life, the world-shaking ideologies of liberalism and socialism, and the romantic promise of personal emancipation. At the same time, however, this same set of ideas seems weak. Weak because its votaries no longer know what its next steps should be. It is, in a sense, lost. Unless we are able to define what should come next, the power of the struggle with the world will continue to wane and deny us the light by which to resist the established order of society and of thought. What then should we do? What is the direction of the religion of the future? Consider this task from two perspectives. From one perspective, the problem lies in the failure of the struggle with the world to make good on its promises. The metaphysical assumptions on which it relies may seem at first to be a litany of platitudes, but they are in fact a string of revolutionary propositions that we have failed fully to assimilate. We do not, for example, fully recognize the reality of time and the openness of history, or the depth of the self and the superior promise of the vulgar. Our societies continue to be organized in a way that belies the vision of humanity represented in these beliefs. Our social organization fails to provide an adequate vessel for the construction of humanity in the direction required by the struggle with the world. It fails in at least three respects. First, it fails by continuing to organize society as class society, and by denying to the mass of ordinary men and women the educational and economic instruments for their self-construction. Second, it fails by not providing an adequate practical basis for social solidarity, for our obligations to one another beyond the boundaries of family selfishness. Money transfers organized by the state are much too weak a social cement and cannot create the sufficient basis of cohesion and reciprocal obligation. And third, the established organization of society fails by continuing to make change depend on crisis, and not establishing the arrangements that would render the impulse to transformation internal and permanent. So you might say, all that is required is to persist in the teachings of the struggle with the world, and to reorganize our ideas and our institutions until they bear more fully the imprint of this vision. But then, from another perspective, the problem does not lie simply in the failure fully to realize the doctrine of the struggle with the world. The problem lies in the teaching itself. The teaching has been unable to convert its vision of the good that lies in the future, whether it is the providential good of divine salvation or the human and historical good of the reconstruction of society, into a good that we can possess right now in life in the present. The only adequate basis for the religion of the future is to combine an unfaltering recognition of the irremediable defects in human existence with a determination to link this orientation to the future to the enhancement of life right now. Such a spiritual orientation must have four major components. The first component is our self-overthrowal. We must face unflinchingly the incurable flaws in human life, of our mortality, of our groundlessness, and of our insatiability. And we must use the confrontation with these flaws as a way to arouse ourselves from the compromises and the sleepwalking that ordinarily consume our lives. Ideas are not enough. There must be practices in society and in culture that enable us, and indeed compel us, to pass from the ordinary moves that we make within a framework that we take for granted to the extraordinary moves by which we change and challenge pieces of this framework. Only through the resistance to structure, only by the revision of the assumptions and the arrangements, do we rise to a greater life and become more fully human. The gateway to that practice passes through the confrontation with the defects in human existence. Religion began in the effort to cope with the terrors of nature. Then it became an attempt to reckon with the larger defects in the human condition. And now, it must allow us more completely to possess the only good on which we can count for certain, which is life right now, to enhance it without allowing its enhancement to be corrupted by the exercise of power over other people. The second element in the religion of the future is the transformation of society. Society must be reconstructed in its institutions, so that human life ceases to be hostage to entrenched inequality, to the absence of any organized form of solidarity among us, and to our continuing reliance on crisis as the indispensable condition of change. To that end, we must reinvent the institutional forms of a free society, of a representative democracy, of a market economy, and of an independent civil society outside the state. The third element in the religion of the future is our self-transformation. We must form a conception of how to live that is faithful to this idea. A conception that not only weans us away from our self-absorption and enables us to free ourselves from the peripheral, but that also and above all opens us to the new and to the others. And what is our reward for this self-overthrowal, for this transformation, and for this reorientation of life? Our reward is greater life right now, achieved not by surrender to the established arrangements and assumptions, but rather by the smashing of the idols and the opening up of another path. Aspiration over obligation, vulnerability over serenity, imagination over dogma, surprise over repetition, hope over experience, prophecy over memory, time over eternity, the personal over the impersonal, life over everything.